When you think of mobsters, you don't typically think of a small rural town in South Dakota. This is the story of Verne Miller, a war hero, lawman, who turned into one of the most notorious gangsters in the United States. Shown here is a bird's eye view of Kimball, South Dakota, where Miller would have walked the streets as a youngster, marking the beginning of his action and violence-filled life. Verne Miller's early life is highly disputed, even his birth date being unverified. But what we do know is that his early life wasn't easy, and he was left to fend for himself from a young age due to his parents' divorce. Around the age of 18 years old, he moved to Huron, South Dakota, working as a small-town auto mechanic, getting married in the meanwhile. At about 20 years old, Miller decided to enlist in the Army, at first serving on the Mexican border against bandit raids, and then at the start of World War II he was shipped off to France, earning the rank of sergeant and being decorated for valor and bravery by the end of the war, marking himself a remembered war hero. When the war ended, Vern returned home to Huron and joined the police force, getting elected to Beale County Sheriff only 2 years later in 1920 at around the age of 24 years old. It wasn't long until he absconded with $4,000 in cash, county funds that is, which could have been prompted by his wife spending time in the hospital due to a serious illness. Having been tracked down and convicted of embezzlement, he served a short sentence in the Sioux Falls Penitentiary, where he landed a position as a warden's personal chauffeur. Getting paroled in November of 1924, after serving only 2 years, he worked as a farmhand and looked as though he had learned his lesson. But shortly after, he was indicted for bootlegging. Miller then posted bond and left the area. Shortly thereafter, Miller met Vivian Gibson, a farm girl from nearby Leola, South Dakota, who joined him in his rapidly growing bootlegging business. They worked hard from 1926 to 1929. Moving to St. Paul, Minnesota, and dominating the Twin Cities bootlegging industry. After expanding with a casino operation in Montreal, Canada, Verne Miller's reckless ambition and greed soon left him wanting more, causing him to turn to bank robbery in 1930. He soon associated with the well-known criminals of the day, including Harvey Bailey, Tommy Holden, Jimmy Keating, Frank Jelly Nash, and George Machine Gun Kelly, robbing banks throughout the Midwest and Southwest. During his legendary run as a nationwide mobster at this time, he had multiple occasions of killings, bank robberies, combining to be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, and altercations with other infamous mobsters. Some of these incidents include the 1930 Fox Lake Massacre, in which Miller single-handedly slaughtered 3 of Al Capone's men in retaliation for their involvement in the killing of one of his friends. In the incident where he teamed up with 6 other notorious gangsters in a daylight raid, resulting in the theft of $70,000 from the bank in Wilmar, Minnesota, ending in Verne Miller killing and dumping the bodies of 3 of his accomplices after an argument that happened months later over a potential double-crossing during the robbery. He was also reportedly involved in the killing of multiple police officers during this time. It wouldn't be long before Miller's reckless actions would catch up with him. On Friday, December 16, 1932, Miller's life would take a turn for the worse. Shortly after an ice storm hit, a dark-colored Lincoln touring car pulled up in front of the 3rd Northwestern Bank of Minneapolis. As the car pulled up, several men approached the front of the building from different directions, later being identified as Alvin Karpus, brothers Freddie and Doc Barker, Bill Weaver, Larry Duvall, and Verne Miller. This was a routine robbery for the experienced group, but things quickly went awry. Several female employees weren't cooperating, causing Freddie Barker to slap one of them, leading to a flood of screams, which prompted the bank guard to pull the alarm. The confusion and panic grew, only worsened by a group of passengers in a streetcar that had stopped out front. Now they were witnessing the robbery, right through the plate glass window. As the robbers, including Miller, filled their bags with their hard-earned loot, Duvall ran outside as the first police car arrived at the scene. Duvall and the getaway driver, Jesse Doyle, began firing at the police, which led to chaos as Duvall slipped on the ice with his finger on the trigger, spraying bullets everywhere, hitting the getaway car, narrowly missing Doyle, and blowing out the front tire. By this time, the rest of the group was exiting the bank and piled into the getaway car, despite a flat front tire. They managed to escape to St. Paul, where they had a hidden second car. By this time, the tire was completely disintegrated off the wheel, and they had been driving at 60 miles an hour on a bare steel wheel on icy roads. Later that night, the group separated, seemingly escaping with around $22,000 in cash. They landed themselves as some of the most wanted men in America. Miller went to Chicago, where the FBI tracked him, attempted to trap him, forcing him into Kansas City, where he'd planned to stay until the robbery cooled off. But it wasn't long before Miller would find himself in even more trouble. Only a few months later, in June of the next year, a phone call came that asked Miller to help with the escape plot to break out his friend, Frank Jelly Nash, who was being transported to the prison through the Union Station in Kansas City. Miller agreed to join Charles Arthur Pretty Boy Floyd and Adam Ricchetti in the plot, though it was disputed that Miller was hired to commit the breakout instead of doing it out of his friendship with Nash. On the morning of June 17, 1933, the trio drove from Miller's house in Kansas City to the Union Railway Station in a green Chevrolet sedan, parked outside the entrance to the station, waiting for the train to arrive. Upon the train's arrival, an entourage of 7 police officers, including an FBI agent, commenced through the lobby of the station with Nash towards the 2 cars parked outside that would make up the convoy. 2 of the officers were armed with shotguns. The others were armed with pistols. The officers ordered Nash to sit in the front seat so they could keep an eye on him. One of the officers spotted a car with 2 armed men running out from behind it, but the third gunman shot from a different position before he could warn the rest of the convoy. Within a minute, gunshots had stopped, leaving 5 dead, including Nash, the attempted escapee, having been accidentally shot by the gunman. The Chevrolet pulled away just as the officers investigating the gunshots began to attack, allowing the 3 to escape safely, having killed 5 and injured another. Following the attack, the FBI took over the case, hiring and arming new agents in order to track down and arrest the key suspects, which at the time only included Miller, with Floyd and Ricchetti being added later on due to a single fingerprint left on a beer bottle found at Vern's house, and a sketchy local Kansas City gangster claiming to know the pair's involvement. There would be multiple attempts to capture Miller in the coming months, including a trap set up at his girlfriend's apartment in Chicago, which he would narrowly escape through a hail of bullets due to an agent's failure to signal his partner. On November 29, 1933, Verne Miller's body was discovered in a ditch in Detroit, having been beaten and strangled. His funeral was organized by his father, and the memorial commenced with a full military rites in the father's hometown of White Lake, South Dakota. And the casket was escorted to nearby Huron, South Dakota, by uniformed ex-servicemen, where Vern was buried and still lies today. The reason for Miller's violent end is unclear, but what is clear is that the Kansas City Massacre, of which Miller was the main suspect, was a large cause of the problems for mobsters all across the nation, including being the primary driver behind public disapproval of the mob and commencing the war on crime that would happen nationally. It is thought by many that the heat caused mobsters to kill Miller, although it is also said that Miller could have shot a henchman of Longies Willman, head of New Jersey's underworld mob in Newark, due to a dispute, leading another associate of Willman to retaliate by killing Miller. Okay, folks, which do you believe? Did the mobs of America kill Miller for the heat he was bringing down on him from the federal government when he was getting a little too wild? Or did Zwillman's associate kill him as an act of revenge? Let us know in the comments. We'd like to hear what you have to think about it. You know, we're going to do a lot of different history videos. So please subscribe, like, comment. All these things help us. And we got lots of interesting stuff planned, so stay tuned. Thank you.